What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Master Crafted. We did a little spin of the wheel, and we got Brett's Grey Knight Banishers list. So Phil and I took a little dive. We decided, we do a little review, see what's in there, and what we would change and how we would maybe switch it up. Phil, what did you find as you were looking at it?
Well, first and foremost, Banishers, I believe, is probably one of the best detachments for Grey Knights. I've played into it many times. I think it's very, very good. Makes them very, very efficient. They have a good suite of strats. They have a couple good enhancements that I like, and the abilities themselves are good. So as a whole, I think Grey Knights are an incredibly good army because they have the tools. They just have to be used properly. So we're going to try to give you, with you, the recommendations that you made in your chat in terms of trying to identify the balance between scoring pieces and, like heavy hitters, and trying to find that balance. So, Lane and I are going to try to help you out.
Yeah, it was super interesting. I thought it was a pretty solid list to start with as well. Only a couple of things that I think Phil and I, we'll both go through our list and you'll see some changes that we both made to it. But for everybody else, we'll run through the list that was submitted. Castellan Crow, a Brotherhood Librarian, Grandmaster and Dread Knight with the Sigil of the Hunt, 2 more Grandmaster and Dread Knight armors, 2 Strike Squads, 2 Interceptor Squads, a unit of 5 Paladins, a Purifier Squad, a 10-man, and then 2 Razorbacks.
Yep, that was 2,000 points on the nose, I believe. Plenty of tools in there, but Lane and I are going to kind of go through some of the things that stood out to us because, I think it's going to give you a little bit more flexibility and lean into what the detachment is actually good at, and not force ourselves in a position where we're not going to be able to use everything to the highest levels. Lane, real quick, what are some strats that are in Banishers that are pretty freaking good?
So the big one is they got to keep the index detachment strat. If somebody moves within 9 of any of your units, you have the ability to spend a CP and put them right back into Deep Strike, which is very, very solid. It's the best one, in my opinion. It also has other good things. It's very niche, but the anti-chaos 4-up is kind of memey, but it is good. And then let's see here. They have Advance and Charge, another amazing strat. Anytime we can abuse some extra mobility for an army that really shines in combat, we are looking to do so. What else is in there, Phil?
They have some very interesting mortal wound defense. So when they've been dealt mortal wounds, they can roll a number of dice equal to the number of mortal wounds that unit suffered, and for each 2-up, that enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wound in return. So it's kind of like they flick the mortal wounds back. So it's not necessarily a mortal wound defense, but it is definitely interesting. They also get a 5-up Feel No Pain against damage 1 attacks, and that's only in the shooting or fight phase, which I also very interesting. It's only your opponent's shooting and fight phase, so you can't use it as the defensive strat when you go into combat, but still super beneficial there. And then they have a 12-inch Deep Strike denial bubble for our Grey Knight characters. So obviously there is benefit for running a few Grey Knight characters, especially when you're running one of those elite armies. You don't necessarily always have the tools to screen out everything, but if you can point to one of them and say, that character is now 12-inch Lone Op, or 12-inch Deep Strike denial, that is very, very nice to have.
Yeah. Some really good tools in here, and the most balance of any of them. We also haven't talked about the detachment rule. Basically, at the start of the fight phase, or whenever you are selecting the unit to fight, you make a leadership test. It's much like Pact for CSM, right? And then you choose between sustained hits or lethal hits if you do pass.
Which is nice to have. It's a leadership check. It's not a battle shock check. So even if you were to fail it, that unit is not battle shocked. So going into combat, it's kind of like Custodes, but we get it for free. Grey Knights actually got to work for it a little bit to get sustained or lethal, which is good. And then obviously they have the army rule, which is at the end of your opponent's fight phase, they get to just pick up 3 units for free, which is insanely good if you factor in also the 4th unit, which is whatever unit you pick up when they move within 9. Now, I will say one thing, and my list, when we talk about this and the strategy that I kind of give Brett is that strat we are relying on often because we are trying to get that strat to go off every single round. We're trying to make the most efficiency with our trades as much as possible. So, for example, we go into a unit, we kill it, we pile into and tag another. Like, we want to make sure that second unit we go into can potentially trigger our go back into Deep Strike strat. So maybe they only have a movement of 6. So when they fall back, they can't get outside of 9 so then we can trigger, go back into reserves, and really, really punish those trades over and over and over again. Yeah, when we go through our list, you'll kind of see, and I'll talk about, and Lane will talk about how we need to use these tools.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think we'll start with yours because we wanted to be a little different here. So you made a very solid standard list, and I ended up making a meme list, basically. Not a true meme, but it's definitely a little more off brand and not standard. But it still has some play, I think. So we'll start with yours and run us through it, man.
Yeah, so a couple things right off the bat that I noticed. I don't like Razorbacks in Grey Knights. I think they don't lean on the tools and the army rule that we have, and they're not good enough to be in there to take points away from the things that actually benefit from the army rule, that actually benefit from our strats and things like that. So there's a caveat. And as someone who runs elite armies all the time, I put a lot of value in where I spend my points because every unit needs to be hyper efficient. So, for example, in my Custodes, I'm a big fan of Wardens. I will run them, until they get nerfed because they are so hyper efficient and they do their job over and over again. Razorbacks don't. They don't benefit from the army rule. They don't benefit from sustained or lethal and shooting. It's just not nearly as good. And I don't need to protect my Grey Knights. Those infantry units in cover. They have a 2-up save, so even indirect with benefits of cover, I feel very, very comfortable keeping those units on the board and being okay with that. Now, there's a caveat to that, and I understand every Grey Knight player who likes running Razorbacks is going to say, well, what about the mobility? What about the mobility? You can pick up 3 freaking units a turn. 3. That's your mobility. Your mobility is your strike squads, your Inceptor squads that are moving 12 inches and have a 6-inch move after they shoot, right? That's your mobility. Your Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knights, they have big profiles. They are going to move. They're going to get up in people's business. The whole point is making the most of those in the advance and charge strat that is going to give you your mobility. It is not the Razorback set. I believe they are a waste of points. I think you are better suited leaning into the things that you're good at. So, to get right into the list, we got a regular librarian, 18-inch low knot. That's pretty freaking good. Really freaking good. Oddly enough, I'm running a Tech Marine, and Lane and I were having discussions about it. This was like the last tool I put in this army, and it's not going to be used for what you normally see. It's a scoring piece primarily because you can pick it up. It does give the +1 to hit to any of these Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knights, which they like, and then it recoups a couple wounds. This is not something to get hung up on. This is not something that's like a key focal point of the piece. But without a Callous Assassin, without any of those uppy down pieces, this is just nice to have and not mandatory in any way. It's just a tool piece, right? And we got to be very careful with those. A regular Grandmaster, he can go Super Saiyan like any other captain. So +3 attacks, +3 strength, really nice. He will go into a unit of Paladins, which is fantastic for the +1 damage. Yeah, it's really, really solid. But more importantly, he gets a free strat or a reduction of 1 CP for any strat that targets his unit. I really like this because almost all the time we are rapid ingressing a unit of Paladins, or we're staging a unit of Paladins, and then we're advancing and charging with that unit of Paladins, and we can do so for free. Really, really, really important because those Paladin bricks are like the mainstay of this army. You really want them to go off well. 3 Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knights, you have them in there. I think they're really solid. You could bump 2 of them down to regular Dread Knights. I think that's fine. To give more advance and charge and more mobility, that wouldn't hurt me at all. Having 1 is nice for that character bubble, that 12-inch bubble of Deep Strike Denial. And if you were to have 3 of them, you could stage in such a way that your opponent has to really deal with that, and you can push out those deep strikes pretty far. And then Castellan Crow. He's a cool model. I love him. He's quite good because of the rerolls he gives your army. The unit that he's in. So I like it. You had 2 strike squads. I'm knocking that down to 1. I just want them for the sticky. I don't need a scouting unit. That's what interceptors are for. I don't want anything else because they're just not as good. 2 squads of interceptors. These are 4-mans. They're solid. They move 12 inches. They have a reaction area after they shoot. They are still Grey Knights. They still have a 2-up save. They can get into cover. They can score you points. and they can bait out really important pieces in trades because they are durable. 2-up save and cover is very tough to deal with for some armies without putting out real assets. And that's the goal of this list. We need our opponent to put out real assets that our paladins can go into. Last up is 2 squads of paladins, 4 mans. You could bump this to 5 mans. You could jiggle some points around. I definitely wouldn't recommend getting rid of the interceptors. I want to run more of them. I don't recommend getting rid of the strike squad. You need some kind of sticky. But the last is a unit of 10 purifiers. Now, this could be overkill. 10 mana purifiers is very, very strong. It will kill most of the things you touch. I definitely recommend psi cannons, so you can take advantage of the reroll hits and the reroll wounds. But it's good. It's very, very solid. It will go into a lot of targets. It will roll a lot of dice. It's going to force your opponent to take a lot of saves. Purifiers are still good in combat. So, yeah, very, very solid list with Crow. There's not many things it can't deal with, and that's one of those things. That's probably the most important asset. You can't give that away early because it is so many points. You got to be very careful with how you trade that piece.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think it's a super solid list. I think we talked a lot about some of the tweaks and things, but it's just solid. I think in Banishers specifically, Phil mentioned you don't really need the Razorbacks because combat is where the detachment really shines, right? Getting those lethals and sustains in combat, you're wanting to take pieces that just can really benefit off of that and do very well. So playing around something that gives you AP1 in your shooting phase by having to take an additional, 85-point unit or even 2 of those, it really kind of feels counterintuitive to what the detachment really feels like it's trying to do, is kind of where we fell on.
Yeah, absolutely. This is 2,000 points on the nose. The pieces that I'd be willing to or I would look at shifting, maybe knocking the 10 mana purifiers down to the 5 man, maybe knocking the Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knights from 1 character or 2 characters to a regular one, because a regular one does have advanced charge, fallback shooting charge, which is nice to have. And maybe fit in a 3rd unit of interceptors or bump the paladins up to 5 mans. I think all of those things would be perfectly fine, and it's fine tuning those last couple points in what you're comfortable with and what you think is going to be effective in your meta. That's going to be the most beneficial.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so Grey Knights is similar to Custodes. It doesn't have a ton of options when it comes to data sheets, so we ended up actually being fairly close on what we were both gonna put out. So I decided I would go ahead and switch it up and throw some odd tech in here, and we're going to go through that. It's more of just a mental exercise than probably something you're really planning to take to a tournament, but that's okay. Maybe you take this and you crush people. I don't know. I don't know. I don't play Grey Knights. It's on you. You can go do it. But to start with, we have the Librarian, and it has the Pyre. It's got the low-knot bubble, and it is just going to point out something and do some mortal wounds every turn, which is handy, which is nice. Whenever it is on the board. I think this could also go potentially on a Grandmaster in Dread Knight armor. The nice thing is it is in your shooting phase, not in your command phase, because you're going to have to make sure you're dropping, or moving into range. Up next, the Tech Marine with the 66th seal. And this is the thing that I thought was actually cheeky. The Tech Marine is the only thing you can attach to purifiers. And me and Phil talked a little bit about it before this, and he mentioned it in his as well, that a 10 mana purifiers is just almost excessive at a certain point. Especially if you have buffs, like when you put it with Crow, the extra shots it's so many shots. That it might be a little bit of an overkill in an army that you're really, really trying not to expend more points than necessary. And so the other tech piece that I thought you could put with it was a Tech Marine with the 66 seal. So instead of extra shots, we're getting extra AP on all of the shots that are getting, including the Storm Bolt or including the Psychic Weapon. It affects all of them. It's just going to bring up that efficiency quite a bit. Again, we're not worrying about running around following the Dread Knights. It's nice to do if you can, but it's just looking to have maybe a little bit more of an auto kill trade piece, right? Like those Purifying Flames with Ignore Cover and AP3 into a lot of infantry is going to be very, very deadly. So I think it's at least worth worth a side eye consideration. 3 GM and DKs, they're just still good. They're the only thing that really, really kills tanks consistently in this army. Is just a super easy way to apply it if you can get deep into their lines. Castell and Crow. You also have the ability, which one goes with a 5-man, which goes with a 10. The choice is up to you based off, the math and what you feel like is best. You also, if it's into something you don't feel like is really necessary, you can leave the Tech Marine completely separate and just have your 5-mana purifiers as a normal trade piece. 1 strike squad, that's all you need. We just need one thing to sticky. The 2 interceptors, still solid. They're great, as Phil was talking about. The great thing with them, right, is you might be advancing and charging, or even just advancing and shooting. If you don't really feel like there's something you can charge or go into, just being that far forward, it's almost impossible for your opponent to respect the 9-inch bubble that this detachment comes with, that if they move that close, they're just gone, right? You're able to just go shoot stuff, get rid of it, move even closer, and say, all right, cool, are you going to be able to, are you going to focus on getting rid of this asset, or are you going to have to respect my bubble and really just not put anything in this part of the board for a turn? It can definitely be very useful as a tech piece early. Then I had just a single Foreman of Paladins to go with the Librarian, the Purifiers as mentioned, and then lastly the Calidus Assassin, because easy extra scoring. If we're tying up our Tech Marine with one of those squads, we lose a piece to up down. And then the other thing, if this doesn't quite suit you, I had an extra 5 points. You can drop the Seal off the Tech Marine, drop the Calidus, and you get your 3rd squad of interceptors, which is just what Phil really wants. So, that's the other way to solve that issue. But you're just not as many Paladins, and I feel like just the more you can get those tanky boys up into combat, the better this detachment does.
Yeah, I totally agree. And interceptors are probably the most important piece for Grey Knights, because if we talk about trading assets, and Lane and I did a whole video on trading, if we go up, we shoot into something, and then we lose that asset, for an elite army, you can't do that. The interceptors actually need to be able to do multiple things, and that doesn't necessarily mean scoring, but like they go up, clear a screen, and then they move 6 inches and hop on an objective. And then them being on that objective means our opponent has to push up. Okay, now they've exposed themselves in a shooting lane. Now our Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight can go up into it and deal with it, or the Paladins can go up into it and deal with it. So we need the interceptors to trigger multiple actions in a game, and if they're not able to do so, we will start finding ourselves in a little bit of trouble there, which is definitely not where we want to be. So if you feel like you're not using, or your interceptors are dying every time they go out, I would say we're probably not using them properly, because they are so critical to running Grey Knights. I like Pyre. It's probably the one enhancement that I'm like, I almost need that in every list, because it's just like a free D3 mortal wounds on top of the mortal wounds that the units are already going to be pushing out. An additional D3 is so very nice, right? That picks up, a Warden, that picks up a Bulgrin, that picks up all of these other things that are just like nice. It's nice to have. So overall, hopefully, Brett, this helped you. Lane and I discussing some Grey Knights for you. Calidus, great asset to have. I would never ever turn down one of those if you have 100 points. But hopefully this gave you a little bit of inspiration for your next Grey Knight list.
Yeah, super fun to look into this stuff and just do some mental exercises. We always like doing this when we have time and stuff, and we're gonna try to keep pushing some more of these out as well. But yeah, in the meantime, thank you everybody for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And do not forget that victory isn't given, it is forged, and it is forged right here on Mastercrafted. We will see you all next time.
See you guys.